welcome to my sewing room. We have a really fun show for you today, and my friend Deb Yedziniak has brought some samples to share with you. Now, when you look at this little doll dress on the Little Dress Me Martha doll, you will see that it looks as if it is real smocking. Well, it is real smocking, but it is real smocking by machine, done the fast and easy way. I bet you all have seen wonderful antique pillows which were smocked and had lots of embroidery, and we've shown you a lot of antique things. Well, guess what? Deb has copied an antique pillow in her private collection, and the ecru smocking, the cables and the waves are all done by machine, and also the beautiful embroidery is done by machine. So this pillow was fast and easy to make. Now, any of you that are like I am and have 12 grandchildren, or some of you probably have even more, you might find it a little hard to hand smock all of the things that you want to smock for the little boys and the little girls. Guess what? If you know how to do smocking by machine, you don't have to spend the hours and hours and hours that you once did hand smocking this cute little sailboat. Here is another little outfit. Looks to me like this is a Christmas outfit, or just for that special little boy to have his one-year picture made in, unless your grandsons are as big as mine are, and this probably would be for a 6-month picture if yours are as big as mine. Look at that beautiful burgundy geometric smocking down the front. Very, very elegant and just perfect for that little boy's Christmas outfit. Talking about pretty Christmas outfits, look at this beautiful little dress with the inset at the waist, all smocked in, machine smocked I might add, with beautiful metallic threads and red and gold and green, lots of colors to pick up the pretty print of the dress. Now you are going to love this idea. This is a little hanger, just on a little plastic hanger available at the discount stores, and it is smocked with the cutest little machine embroidery on top. Wouldn't this be adorable to smock an adorable suit for a little boy or a little girl, and then have a little matching hanger to go with it? Well, here's another idea that is so easy to do. A hand smocked, not hand smocked, I'm sorry, it looks so much like hand smocking, but it's machine smocking. A machine smocked hanger cover and has the words lingerie printed on it. This would be a great way for your robes not to fall off. You know how sometimes they slip off when you hang them in the closet? Come on over to the technique boards with me, and let's share with you just how easy it is to machine smock. I'm so excited about our using adult clothes on this series. The suit that I have on, the jacket that I have on, was made from exactly the same pattern as this one, although they look totally different. Deb has done the most wonderful smocking by machine treatment for this adult jacket. Look how pretty this is with the smocking stitches, and I always have a standard little joke with Deb. If you move out 3 feet, you will never know if it was smocked by hand or by machine. Isn't this beautiful? And then she has used ribbon to hold down the raw edges. Look at the sleeves. Smocking is not just for the tops of the dress or for the suit, it's also for the cuffs of the sleeve, which makes it so pretty. Now let's see exactly how it is that you do this, because once again, you know, everything we do is easy. You can put your pleated fabric either on a fusible tearaway or a fusible interfacing, which would not be torn away. After you run your fabric through your pleater, or your smocking machine as some people call it, this is what it looks like. You can see the lines of pleating there. Let me open this up a little bit so you can see what that looks like. Now you're either going to iron this on a fusible tearaway or a fusible interfacing, which you don't tear away. Let me just show you how easy it is to do machine smocking. These are just regular decorative stitches that everybody has on any sewing machine. Now if your machine is a little fancier, you might have some built-in stitches like this. You just stitch right across it. If your machine is programmable, in other words, if you can build in stitches, you might be able to build in some stitches that really do look exactly like smocking cables, up and down and up and down. And then look carefully on this one. You see how these have been made to match? That's a 2-step wave, and then we'll go down here to a 4-step wave, and actually you can make them match, mirror imaging them, and they will look like you have done geometric smocking straight out of So Beautiful magazine. I am so pleased to have as my guest today my dear friend and business colleague, Deb Yedziniak.
Hi, Martha.
Hi. Deb is an educational consultant for Husqvarna Viking, and she's also a Martha Pullen licensed teacher. Deb, thanks so much for coming to the show today.
I am really happy to be here to share this technique with you. So.
I can't wait. Show our viewers.
Okay. Well, I am a hand smocker. A lot of people have forgotten that, but I am a hand smocker, and that's how I started. So I do everything that I do by machine. I do the same preparation as if I were going to do it by hand. Here I have a piece of pleated fabric, and we know that these threads hold our pleats in place and also act as the guidelines for our smocking stitches. Now, the one thing that I need to do when I'm going to smock by machine is I need to take my fabric and I need to expand it to the size of my pattern piece. And then I need to stabilize the fabric, because the action of the stitches by machine will actually move the pleats. Now, what I'm doing here is simply manipulating the pleats, and I can line them up by pulling my threads. And then here we have a wonderful tool. And this tool we ordinarily use for our hair. But one of my students came up with the idea of using this to help spread your fabric, your pleated fabric, and line up your pleats very neatly so that they'll be nice and neat before you take your stabilizer and iron it on. I also want to take a minute to show that we can take our fabric for bishop's dresses, for our collars, for example, and we can take the fabric and expand it the same way, but what we're going to do is to allow for a curve in the
like
fabric.
You did on the top of the
exactly,
jacket.
That's what I needed to do when I did the jacket.
Yeah.
And then I will take my comb and place this so that I get the shape that I want. And then, of course, as you mentioned, we use the stabilizers, whether it's a tearaway, and if we use a tearaway, then we'll pull all of that stabilizer off afterwards, so no one will know that we actually did this by machine. And here I have a piece of fabric that's already been expanded and stabilized on the back side. Therefore, as I sew along by machine, the pleats aren't going to move and spread apart. So how about if I do a few stitches for you?
Oh, that would be fun.
Here we have our stitches here that we did. And I think, as you mentioned, Martha, so many machines today do have beautiful decorative stitches that they can use over the pleated fabric to imitate the smocking stitches. However, if people happen to have a machine that has the capability of programming stitch combinations in, or perhaps one of the machines that now has built-in stitches, they will be able to simply select the stitch and then do the stitching automatically that will resemble hand smocking.
Here, it will be machine smocking when
it will be when it's done. Here I've simply selected what I call a two-step wave, and I'm going to line up my stitch, and I am going to, I'm going to start my stitching, and I'm going to sew down perhaps a couple of inches. Now, when the person is learning to hand smock, they have to pay attention to their placement of the stitch. They have to pay attention to their tension as they're learning to do the stitches by hand. With the machine, it's wonderful because the machine does the tension automatically and sets the stitches automatically. Now, I've done just enough stitching there, so I'm going to end that row of stitching. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a mirror image function on the sewing machine, and what this is going to do is flip-flop the design so that I am now going to line up a second row of stitching to match my first row of stitching. And at this point, what I like to do is to also utilize what we call a single pattern function on our sewing machine, or a stop function, because what this will do is actually do one complete design and then it will stop automatically. And I call this my opportunity for perfection to match a stitch, because if for some reason the stitch isn't matching exactly, I can simply manipulate my fabric so the needle will go down right where I want it to, and then I will continue to sew. The point is, we want to have the stitches match so that when we're finished, we are going to see that we have actually accomplished a row of geometric diamond shapes or heart shapes in our stitching.
About how often when you're stitching do you have to stop and line up?
Honestly, in the beginning, you'll stop the whole way down. And what's interesting is the point is we want to have a good result. And the more you do this, the better you get, and you'll be able to continue doing your smocking without having to use the stop function. However, if you think you're going to do it just once and have it be perfect, it's not going to happen. And the same thing happens with a hand smocker, because she's going to have to learn to manipulate the stitches. So here we've just finished a row, and you can see very nicely that all of these stitches have lined up and we see diamonds. And that imitates the stitching that we're doing by hand when we're doing geometric shapes, which are traditional in our smocking.
You know what? This is so pretty. I'm going to lay this over there one more time, just so you can show them again what you're talking about on those stitches lining up, which you just did, and that pretty pink on this wonderful lady's jacket.
Right, because what you can see here, for example, this is what we call a baby wave or a baby trellis in smocking terminology, and I use the same names when I'm smocking by machine. And here we have the baby waves, which are formed by the 2 rows of stitching, and then down here we have another row, and then the rows in between are complemented by having our our decorative stitching.
Decorative stitching in between and then mirror imaging to look exactly like we do it with hand smocking. Deb, thank you so very much for being here. And next, Deb has a garment construction tip for you. I'm so excited about Deb's ribbon attachment technique. And Deb, would you show us exactly how you got that band onto your garment?
This was a very easy way to do this. In the past, I've actually cut out the piece of the garment where I was going to insert the smocking, and that's a lot of work. You have to actually plan the dimensions of the finished garment and the piece you put in. This makes it so easy because you're simply using the smocked area as an applique, and you place it on top of your fabric, and then here the raw edge went into the seam of my placket, into the seam along the neckline, and then over here at the shoulder. So that was easy. But what was I going to do in this area where I had the raw edge? The easiest thing to do is to cover this over by using a beautiful ribbon. So you lay the ribbon right over that band, and it's a wonderful way to add more decoration and a lovely finish. Now, when we get started, what we're going to do is do our smocking on a piece of fabric that we see here, and you'll see that all of my pleating threads are still here, and this is just a simple little design. So you'll do all of the smocking, and then what you're going to do is take your smocked piece of fabric and place it onto your fabric of the garment, for example. So here I've actually removed the pleating threads because I no longer need them, but I've left the outer pleating threads because those are my guidelines. What I'll do now is go to the sewing machine and actually stitch this in place, because that's going to hold my piece of pleated fabric right to the fabric here. Then what I'm going to do before I go much farther is I'm going to actually take this fabric and I will trim away now that it's stable. It's just so much easier to lift this up and to simply slip my scissors underneath here and trim away a lot of the excess, let's call it the seam allowance. And that will eliminate the bulk that would be underneath the area of the ribbon. So I will do that on both sides, for example. Then as I continue with that, you'll see that here I've taken away part of the fabric to show where it's been cut away. And now on the other side, I've placed my ribbon right on top of the area that needs to be stitched in place. And depending upon your ribbon and how slippery it is, you know, sometimes a ribbon is very slippery and it will move underneath the presser foot. What I would recommend is that you will actually perhaps use a zigzag stitch to place the ribbon onto your pleated fabric first. Then you'll go back over this and use a decorative stitch. And the reason for using, or also when I'm going to stitch that on, I like to use a zigzag stitch. And that's because the zigzag stitch is more apt to catch in along that narrow edging of the fabric. You can see that the ribbon, just like our laces, have this little bit of edging on both sides, and that's the area usually that we're going to stitch in to make the connection of a ribbon or lace to our smocked area. And as I'm thinking about this, it's giving me an idea that we could use some lace on our pleated or smocked piece of fabric also.
Especially since you've trimmed away most of it.
You'll hardly see it at all, just like if you're doing puffing, but now it's smocking. So after we're done, what we'll do is choose some sort of decorative stitch, and you will go ahead and do the decorative stitching. And at this point, you'll be able to stitch pretty easily because the ribbon has been stitched down first with that little zigzag stitch. And now this will be very easy to stitch using a decorative stitch going right down over the top of the fabric. And I think it's nice to match for example here, I accented the color of the smocking stitches with the same color of thread to do the stitching along my ribbon edges. However, you could have used another color. I could have picked out the green or something else in the ribbon to accent that. So you can see how easy it is to do.
Well, it really is easy, and Deb, it is such a time-saving technique and a very beautiful technique. I want to thank you so much for sharing with me and our viewers how to do machine smocking. And next, I have some silk ribbon stitches for you. I am so happy to have as my guest today my dear friend and business colleague, Beverley Sheldrick. Beverley is from New Zealand. Beverley is a frequent contributor to So Beautiful magazine, as well as many other publications around the world. She has authored her own book on needlework, and she is a teacher at the Martha Pullen School of Art Fashion in Huntsville and has been for many years. Beverley, welcome to the show.
Oh, Martha, it's just such fun to be here with you, as always. Now, Martha, today I want to show your viewers a stitch which we all know, we've all done it so many times, the Japanese ribbon stitch. But I want to talk about it in a slightly different way of using it. It's a very versatile stitch indeed. So it's very, very simple. We can see here that we have the completed daisy. We have the first stitch. We have those 5 ribbon stitches here. Incidentally, if any of your viewers are reading an Australian magazine, they will find that this stitch is called split stitch rather than the Japanese ribbon stitch, or ribbon stitch as you call it in this country. And I've had 1 or 2 people say, what exactly is this? So ladies and gentlemen, it does mean the same thing. So you can see here that I've got the 5 of them here. Now here I've done 2 colours. The colour jump is a little bigger than I would normally do. But you know, if you run out of one particular colour and you still haven't finished that flower, then just take another colour fairly close to it and continue on stitching, which is precisely what I've done here. But you can see here I've filled the centre hole with just a French knot. I've used silk ribbon, but I could have used stranded cotton if I wanted to. So you will also see that the leaves are exactly the same stitch there. And it's really very simple. I'm just going to turn this round like this. And if you remember that when you're taking your needle through, if you put that thumbnail hard up against it like that, then you won't lose the point. And you can see here I've got this flower, this little daisy. You'll also see, Martha, that I've used it on the blouse in a slightly different way, just an isolated way as part of a design rather than part of a group of flowers, which is how we tend to think of use of this particular flower.
I love how you've outlined and the double needle pin tucks, Beverley.
Yes, and just making them very flat, Martha, not trying to raise it in any way.
Okay.
Now the other little daisy that we've got here is one that I have spoken about before, but it is a very simple one, and one that I like to use to great effect. If you look amongst the roses on the blouse I've got on, you'll see they are used simply as fillers. But if you look at the blouse we have in front of us, you'll see that I've really got them very tiny and made to represent almost like a little dot. So again, it becomes part of the design. Now, so here you can see we have a very ordinary one. I've put this little group here, which is how they're usually used, but what I want you to notice is that here I've got a misshapen one. So if by any chance you find you've got a perfect one here, here you've got an odd one, because some girls find it difficult, particularly at first, to get them even. Don't worry if they're part of a group. You just keep on going and they'll soon disappear. Now I've got on this little one here, I just want to go into the direction for this. You will see that I've started in the middle. You can see the direction there. I'm going to go through, and I want you also please to notice that I've come from the middle. I'm spiking that little tail that I left there. Now instead of going back to the middle, I'm going to go across, and I'm coming across like that, and then I will go into that hole again. Because the needle is going down, you will find that it will slide against that, and you'll be able to use the same hole, whereas the previous one we had to leave that little hole in the middle. And if you give it just a little tug like that, then you will find that that central hole will fill very much better. And then the rest of the stitches, you will simply work them from the outside in, but it just allows you to use that same central hole, and it also allows us to get a really small little tiny dot in the way that I have on the blouse. So it's a very versatile way of doing your daisies, just like that. You can see this is a little bigger than I would normally use, but of course I didn't want to make it too small, otherwise your viewers would never see it. But as long as you remember to do it from the center out, particularly when you're first starting, it means that you get rid of this little tag that's the back is secured and held safely in place.
Beverly, that is fascinating, and the blouse is very, very elegant and very, very different and creative and unique.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And won't you come along with me to my attic? It is always so much fun for me to find a dress that has a really unusual treatment. First of all, this pretty little collar is so widely spaced. I think it's wonderful. But what I really want to show you is the way that the dolman sleeve has been built into this dress with the tucks. You see, this was done from a strip of fabric that went all the way across, and there really is not a set-in sleeve. It is so pretty all the way down, and we come to the waist, and there's a beautiful piece of Swiss beading, which of course you run ribbon through to tie the little dress up, but I wanted you to be able to see those pretty the details on this. And this is Swiss eyelet fabric that has been used for the skirt. Now let me just show you. The back is equally as beautiful and equally as elaborate as the front. As a matter of fact, the back is exactly like the front, and that's kind of unusual to have exactly the same amount of treatment on the back as on the front. And it also has those sweet little original buttons that came on the dress, and that's unusual too. For our Sewing from the Heart today, I have a letter from Millie Paxton from Richmond, Texas. Our American Sewing Guild neighborhood group has been making heart-shaped pillows to be used by mastectomy patients. These little pillows are shaped like a heart and are the right side for tucking under the arm of patients, helping to relieve pressure following surgery. Our small group of women got together one evening and produced these pillows. We all contributed fabrics, trims, and batting. Some of the group cut out, some sewed the pillows together, and others others stuffed and stitched the opening closed. This is the second year we've done these pillows, and they have been very much appreciated by the groups who distribute them to patients along with their post-surgery kits. Thank you so much for letting me share our group with you, and that is the American Sewing Guild Neighborhood Group from Richmond, Texas. Sincerely, Millie Paxton. Millie, thank you so much for writing about your pillows that you're using. You know, a lot of sewing, a lot of charitable sewing is being done in the sewing industry to raise money for Sew for the Cure. Thank you so very much for joining me in my sewing room today. I've had such a good time, and I hope you have too. And most especially, I would like to invite you to come back next time.